The year was 1739. Delhi, once considered one of the world's wealthiest cities, was reduced to ruins and piles of corpses within a matter of months. Crossing the Khyber Pass came a plunderer who not only plundered the Mughal Empire's wealth but also destroyed its prestige forever. The Kohinoor and the Peacock Throne, the pride of the Mughal Empire, were gone forever. The walls of the Red Fort fell silent, and the streets of Delhi were filled with deathly silence. But did you know that the person responsible for this horrific plunder of Delhi was a shepherd? This is the story of a man who raised the world's largest army of his time. Who was this man who defeated 3 lakh Mughal soldiers with his 70,000 Persian soldiers? Let's explore the story of that plunder and the plunderer who was the king of Iran and known to the world as Nadir Shah, a man who forever associated his name with blood, plunder and destruction. A chapter that changed the course of Indian history forever. So friends, watch the video completely, because if you don't know your history, how will you know yourself? In the year 1688, a child was born in the Khorasan region of northeastern Iran. His parents were shepherds. Nadir Shah's father died when he was a child, leaving Nadir Shah with the responsibility of this extremely poor family. Nadir would sometimes go to bed hungry with his mother, sometimes work as a farm laborer, and sometimes herd goats to make ends meet. But Nadir possessed 2 things from childhood: a sharp mind and immense pride. He would often say to his companions, "He who wields the sword decides his destiny." Perhaps it was this thought that led him on a path where he set out not just to survive, but to rule. When Nadir grew older, he left his job as a goat herder and formed a small band of bandits and horsemen. Gradually, his bravery and fighting skills became well known. At that time, Iran was under Afghan rule and the great Safavid Empire had disintegrated. Nadir established himself as a military leader, first as a general and then as a major power player. In 1729, he defeated the Afghan leader Ashraf Hotak in a battle and drove the Afghans out of Persia. From that day on, his fortunes changed. The Iranian Shah Tahmasp II appointed him his general. In return, Nadir Shah granted him Mashhad, a holy city in Iran, and annexed it. However, Nadir had come to live under no one's influence. In 1736, after he had wiped out the remnants of Safavid dynasty, he declared himself Shah of Persia. There's a little story behind this too. So what happened was that after conquering Mashhad, Nadir's power was increasing and Tahmasp was unable to digest this growing power. Then a rift began to develop between Nadir and Tahmasp. Courtier also left no stone unturned in poisoning Tahmasp's ears. Then in 1727, Tahmasp went to Kurd and declared Nadir Shah a traitor. Meanwhile, Nadir immediately confiscated all the property of Tahmasp and his ministers in Mashhad and besieged a Kurdish city, forcing Tahmasp to compromise. From here, Nadir Shah's power increased significantly and he became emperor without even ascending the throne. After this, Nadir's power, which had increased, never diminished. His army was helping him in all of this. Nadir Shah's army was the largest army in the world at that time. Even in Europe, no one had a more powerful army than him. In his army, there was a commander for every 50 soldiers, and the commander was appointed by Nadir Shah himself. The training of the army was also very tough. Real weapons were used in these exercises, which was very rare to see. When there was no fighting, Nadir was also part of this training. Due to this rigorous training, his soldiers were ready to fight in any conditions. The army could change its strategy at Nadir's command. With this, he defeated the Ottomans, drove out the Russians, and finally, by 1735, conquered all of Iran, disposing Safavid emperor and becoming the official king. Talking about Nadir Shah's army, it was considered the most disciplined and dangerous army in West Asia. Every soldier in its army was rewarded for his loyalty, and the punishment for treason was death. However, Nadir Shah's greed was as deep as his sword was sharp. He had a different kind of hunger for gold, silver, and power. His empire in Persia was strong, but deep within him lay a hunger for the wealth of Hindustan. He knew that for centuries, India had been the key to the world where gold was sold on the streets and silk fluttered in the air. After conquering Iran, he first conquered Kandahar and then advanced on Delhi, which was at that time in a different state of ecstasy. After Aurangzeb's death, the Mughal Empire began to crumble. The throne of Delhi was now merely a name. Muhammad Shah Rangila was in power, a king engrossed in a gaiety of his court, who cared neither for governance nor for borders. Mughal governors and Nawabs had now become petty kings in their respective kingdoms. Hyderabad, Awadh, Bengal, all had gradually severed ties with the central power. But the Mughal Empire's treasury still held wealth that dazzled the entire world. Nadir Shah knew that if he wanted to reach Delhi, the path was now open. Historian Sir John Malcolm writes that Nadir Shah's spies observed the plight of Mughal officers. Soldiers had been without pay for months. Officers were mired in bribes, and border outposts were barely manned. It was at this time that Nadir Shah decided to invade India. He even had a ready-made pretext for this invasion. In fact, some tribes in the Afghan region between Kandahar and Kabul had rebelled, and many of them had entered Mughal territory. Nadir Shah wrote a letter requesting the handover of these rebels to Iran. There is an interesting story behind this whole scene. It is said that when Nadir Shah's letter came into the hands of Muhammad Shah Rangila, he was drunk at a party. Upon receiving this letter, he dissolved it in alcohol. Still, Nadir Shah said once again that those who have taken refuge should be handed over to us. This was also not acceptable to Rangila. Then the same thing happened which should not have been happened. The common people of Delhi suffered the consequences of these decisions of Rangila. By the way, let me tell you one more thing here. One of the reasons behind Nadir Shah's attack on Delhi was his huge army. Historians say that Nadir Shah's army was ever growing and extremely expensive, requiring vast sum of money to maintain it. And Delhi was a good answer to his needs because of its wealth. In 1738, he entered the Indian border with an army of approximately 1 lakh men. This army consisted of 70,000 cavalry, 30,000 infantry. He quickly conquered the valleys of Kandahar, Ghazni and Peshawar. Then advancing into Punjab, he attacked Multan and Lahore. During this period, the Mughal commander Nasir Khan and Subedar Zakaria Khan were responsible for defending Lahore, but none could withstand Nadir's massive army. Well, after reaching Lahore, he was faced with the opulent Delhi, the capital of India and the heart of the Mughal Empire. This Delhi was guarded by Emperor Muhammad Shah Rangila himself. But the question was, would he be able to stop a predatory power like Nadir Shah? Nadir Shah, who marched towards India in 1738, reached Karnal, about 110 kilometers away from Delhi. In February 1739, his army reached this area. Historians write that the Mughal army numbered approximately 3 lakh soldiers, 100 of elephants, cannons and horses. Nadir Shah's army numbered only 70,000. But these 70,000 were men for whom war was their very life. Delhi's Emperor Muhammad Shah Rangila personally led the army, but there was a severe lack of unity among his advisors and generals. The court's princes, nobles and governors, everyone was preoccupied with displaying their own prestige and power. Nadir Shah, on the other hand, had carefully planned each move. He had his spies map out the entire Mughal camp. He knew where the cannons were, where the elephants' lines were, and which direction would be the most dangerous to attack. On the morning of February 24, 1739, Nadir Shah deployed his cavalry on both flanks and placed his artillery in the center. His cannons were light and fast, while the Mughal cannons were heavy and slow. Mughal historian Khafi Khan writes that the Mughal soldiers had not yet determined which direction the attack would come from. Within hours, the Mughal army's lines began to break. Thousands of soldiers were either killed or fled. This was a devastating defeat for Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah Rangila, and the fear of this defeat was so profound that Muhammad Shah Rangila himself went to Nadir Shah's tent the next day and surrendered. And like this, one of the world's wealthiest cities stood before Nadir Shah with its head bowed. The Mughal capital, Delhi, which had allowed no external enemy to reach its walls since Aurangzeb, was now hearing the footsteps of a foreign army. Historians agree that the defeat at Karnal had broken the backbone of the Mughal Empire. Delhi was no longer a city, but an open treasury. But even Nadir Shah probably couldn't have imagined the fate that was about to befall Delhi. For in the next few days, Delhi would be drenched in blood. 2 days later, both the sultans entered Delhi, along with Nadir Shah's 40,000 strong army. Nadir Shah was made to stay in the emperor's resting place, while Rangila had to stay in the women's quarter. On the evening of March 10, 1739, Nadir Shah's soldiers were roaming the streets and lanes of Delhi with impunity. Meanwhile, someone spread a rumor that Nadir Shah had been assassinated by his Turkish female bodyguards while he was returning from a meeting with the Mughal emperor. This rumor spread like wildfire throughout the city. Some people took advantage of this rumor. They took up arms and began killing Iranian soldiers roaming the streets and lanes of the city. They continued killing Iranian soldiers throughout the night. By morning, approximately 3,000 soldiers had been killed. Nadir Shah had received news of an attack on his troops in the early hours of the night, but he was unconvinced. He suspected that some mischievous members of his own army had spread the rumor to gain an opportunity to plunder the city. However, when the news continued, he became concerned. He sent one of his representatives. No sooner had he left the fort than the crowd gathered there and killed him. The same fate befell his second representative. Nadir then dispatched 1,000 gunmen, but this force was insufficient to control the enemy. In the ensuing attack, more of Nadir Shah's men were killed. This time, Nadir Shah showed no mercy. The next day was Sunday, March 11th. As soon as morning dawned, the commotion began again. Nadir, dressed in full military uniform, accompanied by his soldiers, arrived at the golden mosque of Roshan-ud-Dawla in the center of Chandni Chowk. He drew his sword and ordered a massacre. His soldiers, still handcuffed, were desperate for revenge. As soon as they received the order, they charged forward. The most horrific massacre took place in the area around the Red Fort, Dariba and Jama Masjid in Chandni Chowk. This was where the most expensive shops and jewelers' homes were located. Nadir Shah's soldiers went from house to house killing people. As they massacred, they looted people's belongings and abducted their daughters-in-laws and daughters. No one, young or old, was spared. The massacre began at 9 am and continued unabated until 2 pm. 30,000 people were killed in this massacre. Only when the Nizam of Delhi begged Nadir Shah with folded hands to forgive the people did the massacre stop. However, in return, he took 1 billion rupees and looted all the wealth the Mughal had accumulated over the past 250 years, including the rare Kohinoor Diamond and the Peacock Throne, the world's most expensive throne and the world's most precious diamond. This massacre permanently shattered the Mughal morale. The Mughal army, once magnificent and disciplined, was now weakened and divided. Civilian security was minimal and Delhi's trade came to a standstill. Nadir Shah's plundering scale was so massive that the Mughal Empire never returned to its former strength. Historian Khafi Khan wrote, "In just one night, the soul of Delhi ceased. The crown, the treasury and the people, everything passed into foreign hands." He returned to Iran with his looted wealth. Stories of Nadir Shah's plunder spread throughout the world, but this was also the beginning of Nadir Shah's end. Upon reaching Iran, he discovered that his son had killed Tahmasp and was considered himself a king. This led to tension between Nadir Shah and his son, but his health also deteriorated. Amidst all this, he discovered that his son was plotting to kill him, and in a fit of rage, he had his son's eyes gouged out. After this incident, Nadir Shah's mental state deteriorated to such an extent that even his family members began to avoid him. Meanwhile, feeling threatened by his Iranian commanders, he entrusted his security to a loyal Afghan named Ahmad Shah Abdali, the same Ahmad Shah Abdali who had won the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. Then, on one night, while Nadir Shah was sleeping, an Iranian soldier assassinated him. In this way, the son of a shepherd who raised the world's largest army, on whose strength a country named Iran emerged and met his end. So friends, this was the story of Nadir Shah who plundered Delhi. I hope you like the video. If you like this video, then comment and share the video.